There is another psalm that is very, very common when you say, let's say a psalm, right? Let's daven for for whatever, and it's for sick people, and it's for difficulties with Israel, whatever it is. It's Psalm number 130, and I'm going to put it up on the screen in a minute with the English. It's Psalm number 130. It's called Shir HaMaalos Mimamakim. It's a song of ascents. So let's just read through it. Shir HaMaalos Mimamakim kirasicha Hashem. And I'm sure that for most of you it's familiar in the sense that at some point you either said this psalm, or you've heard it being said, and I'll tell you that even if that's not true, this is a psalm to get to know, and it's very easy, very easy. It's an easy read. It's only 8 verses. It's not a long psalm, but it's a psalm that gives so much comfort and solace. And I'll by the time we finish, I think you'll understand. So Shir HaMaalos, a song of ascents. We spoke about last week the concept of that there were 15 steps that existed from the lower courtyard to the actual entrance to the temple itself, called Shar Nicanor's gates, and they were round steps. There were 15 of them, and the Levites would stand there and they would sing, and on those steps, the reason why there were 15. And there were 15 of these psalms, Shir HaMaalos, Song of Ascents. There was 15 of them. And the reason there's 15, by the way, in the Seder, there's also 15 things. Kadesh, Urchatz. There are 15 of those. The number 15 is a very significant number. Because when God talks about, and we'll see it in this psalm too, when God talks about the creation of the world, he says that the world was created, ki b'yah Adonai Tsur Olamim. That God created Tsur Olamim, created the world, b'yah, with the Yud and the Hay. The Hay is the creation of Olam Hazeh, of this world, and the Yud is the creation of Olam Haba. I'm not going to spend time right now because there's other things I want to do. I'm not going to spend time right now on what exactly that means, of that God created this world with a letter Hay, and the next world with the letter Yud. But those are the 2 letters, so to speak, that God shaped the world with. And the numerical value of those is Yud Hay is 15. 15 is always an indication of God's name. Also important to know, what's God's full name? His full name is Yud Hay Vav Hay. Now, you notice I didn't say it. We don't vowelize it. We don't say it. It's written in English always, JHW, EH, whatever. That we don't say that. We don't verbalize it, because this name is God's special name. It's an ineffable name. It's a name that we don't say. However, we know that this is the name, Yud Hay Vav Hay, which contains everything. Haya, God was. Hoveh, he is. V'yiyeh, and he will be. It's also the name that indicates God's mercy and God's kindness. And that if you look in the Torah, whenever you see God's justice happening, it's the name Elohim that is being used. And whenever you see God's mercy happening, then it's the name Adonai, the name Yud Hay Vav Hay, the name Hashem that's being used. What's fascinating, if you look at the first chapter of Bereshis, 2 weeks ago is Parsha, when God created the world. So he created the world, it says, Bereshis bara Elokim. And in the entire chapter, it only uses God's name as Elokim. Then, in the second chapter, where it goes into the details of the creation of man, all of a sudden it says, Vayivra Hashem Elokim. Now it says Yud Hay Vav Hay and the word Elohim. The reason is when God created the world, he created the world in a black and white way. The word Elohim means God is a judge. It's the Midas Hadin. It's the attribute of God's justice and judgment, which means it's the way God looks at a world in a very tight kind of way. It's either 100 or it's 0. And God has that attribute as king of the world, as Elohim. It's the world is very tight. However, once he gave us free will, man can't live that way. We can't be held to the standard of it's either 100 or it's 0. We have to be given a little bit of credit for signing our name correctly on our paper. Right? Knows we have to be given a little fudge room because God gave us choices. And therefore, sometimes we make the right choices, sometimes we make the wrong choices. We have to be able to be given wiggle room. So when God talks about the creation of the world, it's only one midah, one attribute. That's the attribute of Elohim, justice. This is creation, it's justice, it's din. But then when man was created, God mitigated that justice with mercy, and it now becomes Adonai Elohim. However, in a world where evil exists, it's difficult to see God's mercy. And it's difficult to see God's greatness, and it's difficult to see his kindness, because it's often obscured by the evil and the wickedness that is surrounding it. And therefore, as long as Amalek, which is the arch enemy of the Jewish people, and Amalek is not just a nation anymore, Amalek represents an attitude of war with God, without getting political, but that's what the enemies of the Jewish people, their war is not with the Jews. Their war is with God. In last week's Parsha, when they built the Tower of Babel, they weren't just building a tower, they were making war with God. Now you think what I mean is that they were building the tower, as it says, to climb up to the heavens and sort of fight with God. No, there was much more profound than that. If you look at the Parsha, there is 2 verses that talks about the creation of bricks, that they made bricks. It was a new invention of making bricks, because up until then, all of their homes were made out of stone, hewn stone. Now they were building this tower and this city, they were building it out of bricks. What's the significance of this switch from stone to bricks? Because stone is God's material. Bricks are man's material. They looked for something other than stone because they were trying to reject God's material. They were trying to reject God's influence and God's rulership of the world. It wasn't just that they were standing there and bowing down to idols or thinking they were going to fight with God. Their entire existence, everything they did, was a rejection of God. As long as Amalek, as the Amalekites continue to live in this world, as long as there is evil in this world, then we refer to God as Yah, Yud Hay, and not the full name, Yud Hay Vav Hay. Because our job is to attach the Yud Hay to the Vav Hay. Our job is to take the godliness in this world and to be able to attach it to the ultimate godliness in God's world. But right now, and this is, I'm telling you a verse in the Torah, that the Torah says, Ki yad al kes Yah, that it's a hand on the throne of God, but calling God not Yud Hay Vav Hay, calling God Yud Hay. Because Yud Hay is the symbol of God when God is impaired. There's nothing wrong with God. God is not missing anything, but in this world, it's difficult for us to be able to see God. It's not difficult for us to be able to see God in the past. It's not, which is in the word Yah, Hayah was. It's not difficult for us to see God in the future, because God's promised us that he's going to be there in the future. And that's Yah. Ye will be. But it is very difficult to see God now. And that's Hoveh, now, present. That's where the difficulty comes. And that's the letters that are missing, the Vav and the Hey. And that's why you will perhaps notice that sometimes in a siddur it's printed when it says that Hineni muchen u'mezuman, I'm about to participate in this mitzvah, and what I'm trying to do is to be miyached the Yud Hay to the Vav Hay. I'm trying to connect the Yud Hay, the God of the past, the God of the future, with the Vav Hay, with the God of the present, to be able to bring a little bit of God's light into the world. So this is just a little background of understanding that when you see the word Adonai, you know you're talking about God's ultimate mercy. When you see the word Elohim, you're talking about God's din, his justice, his judgment. And when you see the word Yah, you know you're looking at God's presence in this world that is an impaired presence. Okay, let's take a look at this psalm. Shir HaMaalos, a song of ascents. Mima'amakim kirasicha Adonai. From the depths, I'm just going to translate it first. From the depths I call out to you, God. Adonai, shim'a b'koli, hear my voice. Tiyena aznecha kashuvot. Let your ears be attentive, l'kol tachanunai, to the voice of my supplications. Im avonos tishmar, if you're going to hold on to our sins, Adonai mi ya'amod, who is going to be able to live? Ki imcha slicha, forgiveness is in your hands, leman tivarei, in order that people should have fear of you. Ki visi Hashem kivsa nafshi, I hope to you, from the word tikva, I hope to you, God. Kivsa nafshi, my soul hopes to you. Ulidvaro hochalti, and for your word I wait. Nafshi la Adonai, mishomrim la boker, my soul belongs to God, more so than Shomrim Laboker, than people who await the morning, the guardians of the morning light. Shomrim Laboker, those that wait the morning. Yachel Yisrael Adonai, Israel hope for God. Ki im Adonai chesed, because chesed belongs with God. V'harbe imo fidus, and redemption, much redemption is his. V'hu yivdes Yisrael mikol avonosav, and he will redeem the Jewish people from all of their sins. Okay, so if I were to ask you just to tell me what you think this psalm is saying, what's the point of the psalm? So I think that there's a motif word, like in most things in Scripture, and I think that it's all about hope. It's kivisi Hashem kivsa nafshi. Lidvaro hochalti, the word kivisi is a word of hope. Hochalti is the word of hope. Yachel Yisrael el Hashem, it's hope. And then it ends with the confidence. V'hu yivdes Yisrael mikol avonosav, that he is definitely going to redeem us. But what's the message of this psalm? So I think I'm going to do just two little things, and then we'll see beautiful things. The first is, if I was versatile and really knew how to use a computer, I would be able to do this, but we're just going to have to visualize this. But I want you to imagine there are 4 pieces in this 8-verse psalm. Verses 1 and 2 is piece number 1, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8. And if you look at it that way, so then verses 1 and 2 are a plea to God that he should hear us. And if you look carefully at the Hebrew, it's in second person. We're talking to God. Mima'amakim krasicha Adonai. Adonai, God, please listen to my voice. It's all in second person. And then verses 3 and 4, that's all about forgiveness. Then verses 5 and 6 is all about waiting for the dawn and waiting for that redemption. And then verses 7 and 8, redemption is coming. So we're asking God to enact and to activate his power of forgiveness, because ultimately we're waiting for the dawn, we're waiting for the redemption, and we know that the redemption is coming. That's simply put. That's what we're trying to convey here. This is being recited by a David HaMelech, who is reciting this on behalf of people in Golis. Please remember that whether you live in America or whether you live in any other country or whether you live in Israel, we are in a state of Golis. We have a tendency to talk about Israel And it's a big tendency for Israelis and Americans that have made Aliyah to do this, to look back at America and say that that's Golis. Hate to break the news to you. Golis is a state of existence. It is not a geographic location. And we're sitting here. The milchama that we are experiencing, the war and the hatred and the vileness and viciousness that we are experiencing, the watching of our enemies from the north and from the south gather against the Jewish people, we are watching Golis, the effects of Golis. When we sit and we watch, and I've mentioned this every week, and I apologize, but we watch Jews hating Jews, we're watching the effects of Golis. You know what Yerushalayim was called? Yerushalayim was called an Ir Shechuber LaYachtov, a city that gathered everybody together. Because it wasn't just that we went there, all of us, to Jerusalem, but that it had an incredible tendency that when you walked into Yerushalayim, it didn't make a difference where you were coming from. It didn't matter what your background was. It didn't matter conservative, Orthodox, Reform. It didn't make a difference who you were. You walked in, and there was a unity in Yerushalayim because there was only one banner in Jerusalem, and that was God. There was only one purpose in Yerushalayim, and that was God. I'm sorry, just a small technical difficulty.
Rabbi, you're a pro.
Yes, yeah, I know how to press the buttons. So we have to recognize that we are in Golis, we are in exile, and that everything we're watching is what happens in Golis. And what do we have to do with that? Okay, let's look back at this mizmor now. Mima'amakim krasich Hashem. I call out to you from the depths. From the depths, our commentaries explain that means that we feel like we're in the depths of the sea, like we're drowning. A person needs to feel that way, in the sense that we know, psychologists will tell us, that you're not going to change anything in your life until you feel like you've hit rock bottom. And if you can't change anything, the reason why nothing is changing is because you don't believe that you've hit rock bottom. When a person is an addict and a person their life is unraveling, and they say, oh yeah, I'm going to change tomorrow. Unless that comes with admission that they have hit the bottom of the barrel, then that change is not going to happen. And they're going to go down, and they're going to go further, and they're going to go further until they actually hit rock bottom. Sometimes, unfortunately, that becomes too late, because now they no longer have the tools or ability to be able to pick themselves up. But when we daven to Hashem, we need to feel at this moment that I am drowning, at this moment that I need to grab onto a lifeline. I've spoken about this many, many times in many different classes, but that one of the foundations of tefillah is that when we stand in front of God, we have to feel that there is nothing else in this world that is going to help me other than God. And that we have to feel that sense of that I can't do this. There's nobody around me that can do this. This is actually going to come from God. You know, when we go to a doctor, and very often we put trust in the doctor and we believe that the doctor is going to help us. We're not stupid enough to believe that God is not going to help us, and we think he's going to help us. But if you listen to the words we use, it sounds more like God's going to help us also. No, it's not God's going to help us also. And sorry to all the doctors. It's not God's going to help us also. It's that God is going to help us. And all the doctor is the shaliach. He is the emissary of God. He's the messenger of God. Doctors that feel that way are the amazing doctors, and we Jews need to feel that way. That anything, whether it's a doctor, whether it is a king, whether it is a politician, whether it is a prime minister, whether it is an army, no matter what it is in the physical world, that is only helping us because ultimately God is helping us. And that when I stand in front of God, I have to feel that this is the only address, the only place where I'm going to get salvation. Mima'amakim, and I call from the deepest of places, the darkest of places, knowing that when I do that and I rely on God, then I know that my prayers are going to be answered. There's a famous story of the Kotzker Rebbe. That the Kotzker Rebbe once had a sister who came to him, and she told him that she was sick, and she went to the doctors. And she looked at her holy brother and she said, I need you to pray for me. And he said to her, what are you bothering me for? You asking me to pray? I can't pray for you. Like, get out of here. And he threw her out of his office and slammed the door. And from the other side, you heard her crying. He opens the door. And she looks at him and she says, I don't know where else to turn. Why did you do this to me? She said, the only place I have to turn now is to God. And he looks at her and he says, come back inside. Because that's exactly right. I wanted to make sure that you didn't think that I can do anything for you. Because I can't do anything for you. It's only God that can do something for you. Shir HaMaalos Mimamakim can only tell you the crazier things get here, the more faith grows. Pardon me if I've repeated this, but do you know what was the most asked for thing by soldiers, both those that were enlisted and those that were called up? So you probably say, toothpaste, because a lot of guys left on Simchas Torah morning. 300,000 Jews were called up on Simchas Torah morning. They didn't have the little travel bag, right? They certainly didn't get one on the bus up to the base that they were going to. This wasn't first class on on American Airlines. They didn't get a little toilet kit. So in the beginning days, they were sending toothpaste and toothbrushes and all that kind of stuff. So one soldier sent around a video and he said, I just wanted you to know that we're all very well taken care of here. I've got 10 tubes of toothpaste. Baruch Hashem, he said, I've got as much toothpaste as I'm going to need. I got 10 tubes of toothpaste. He said, but the only reason that I have 10 tubes and not 15 tubes is because I'm not an officer. And as the officers, they had 15 tubes. That was what was pouring out. And then all of a sudden, it changed. And what were soldiers asking for? No, not religious soldiers. All the soldiers were asking for tzitzis. Tzitzis. They were asking for not religious. Why were they asking for tzitzis? Because they realized that there's a protection with tzitzis. You don't understand what happened in the non-army part of the country. All of a sudden, there were donations. There were procurements, tens of thousands of garments. They have to be made. They have to be tied. Tying them takes about a half hour a piece, and it's a skilled thing. You got to know how to do it. In shuls all over the country, they were dropping off bags with tzitzis, with strings, and with garments, and people were gathering together. In our yeshiva, we did a few days of it, of just sitting there and tying the garments. And then they got picked up and they got brought to the front and they were given out to people. Thanks. There's an incredible story of a guy who was engaged in a gun battle. And unfortunately, he was shot. Shot and exhausted. It was a whole build up to what happened. And he ended up falling. He was alive, but he ended up falling amongst the terrorists that he had just killed. when the army came, there was this guy, and he was amongst the terrorists, and he was dressed in street clothes because he didn't have a uniform yet. And here he was amongst the rest. They assumed that he was a terrorist. But he grabbed his tzitzis, not religious fellow. He grabbed his tzitzis from under his shirt and he pulled them out. He couldn't speak. And he pulled them out. And they said, oh, this guy's one of us. And Baruch Hashem, he was saved. It's an unbelievable thing. The amount of faith that's going in that's building in this country. But it's because we recognize Mima'amakim, that we are for now, the deepest of places, the lowest of places. Could it get lower? I think it probably could. But we feel with what went on and with the pressure that lives around us, Mima'amakim krasich Hashem. Second verse, Adonai Shema b'koli, God, listen to my voice. It doesn't say listen to my words. Because very often, if you really want to understand what's going on with a person, you have to hear what they're really saying. Not the words they're saying, but what's really going on inside of them. I could tell so many famous stories, but there's an incredible story with the Brisker Rav, that a person once came to the Brisker Rav and said to the Rav, he asked him a question, a very complicated Pesach question. He said, we know we have to have 4 cups of wine. He says, if you can't afford 4 cups of wine, can I fulfill the mitzvah of the 4 cups of wine with 4 cups of milk? So the Brisker Rav went and he gave him money for wine. Because he realized that if he's asking that shaila, can he fulfill the mitzvah on milk? Must be that he's poor. Then the Brisker Rav said, wait a second. And he went into his drawer and he took out a big wad of money and he gave it to the fellow. So his children asked him, why'd you give him so much money? He says, because you have to listen to what he was saying. If he was thinking about making the 4 cups of wine on milk, that means he wasn't eating meat at his meal. Yeah. Because 2 of those cups come before the meal, but 2 of those cups come after the Suda, come after Shulchan Aruch, come after the meal. But if he's thinking about using milk, that means he's not even planning on eating meat. That's why I gave him more money, because I realized how impoverished he was. Because he was listening not to the words that he was saying, but he was listening to what was really going on in the heart of a person. In order to be able to listen to another person, to be able to give advice, we have to listen not to words. We have to be able to see deep into the soul of a person. Adonai Shema b'koli, God, don't get lost in my words. I don't even know what to say. Tiyana aznecha kashuvos, your ears should be listening to the real sounds of my supplications. They might sound cold, they might sound mechanical, but I promise you that inside my heart, there is nothing cold and mechanical going on. But God, you know why I feel so low? Do you know why I'm in Mima'amakim, why I'm in the depths? Look at verses 3 and 4. Because I know that I'm not perfect. And I'm afraid that if you're going to look at my imperfection, you're going to wipe me out now. That if you look at all the parts of me that are no good, im avonos tishmar yah, Adonai mi yamod, God, who's going to be able to stand through this? Who's going to be able to live with this? Ki imcha aslicha, but I know that with you is forgiveness. Leman tivarei, and when people see you forgiving us, when people see you reaching back to us, so then they will fear you. They will feel connected to you. They'll be motivated to come back to you. When we start to see the miracles, when we start to see how God has not forsaken his people, when we start to see some of those holes being forged, some of those fissures being closed, So then people start to draw back. Look at all the videos that you see. All the videos, and I'm sure you see them all, of the soldiers on the front. What are they singing? They ain't singing "She Loves You," yeah, yeah. They ain't singing Beatles tunes. They ain't singing all the popular songs that are out there today. They're singing Am Yisrael Chai. They're singing V'tayar Libenu. They're singing "We Love You, God. God loves us." That's what they're singing. It's the most incredible thing to watch. Jews with yarmulkes, Jews without yarmulkes, Jews that are connected, Jews that are not connected. It's amazing to see. Because once you recognize that God is there, so then then people start to open their eyes to see God, to feel that sense of awe of God. Verses 5 and 6. God, once I realize that it's in you and it's in me, the more I turn to you, now I feel daunted. Now my conversation with you is no longer in second person. Now my conversation with you is in third person. Because I feel like I'm standing in your presence. I feel like I'm starting to draw closer to you. Kivisi Hashem kivso nafshi. My hope is in you, God. My hope is not in governments. My hope is not in ammunition. Kivisi Hashem kivso nafshi. My hope is in you, God, and Adonai, your mercy. Ulidvaro hochalti, and I'm waiting for one thing. I want to hear your word. And what's that word? Come home, my children. Nafshi la Adonai. My soul is to God. I pine away for that moment that God brings us home. Brings us home doesn't just mean that we move to Israel. Bring us home means that the world is back to where it needs to be. The Beis HaMikdash exists where it's meant to exist, and that our center becomes the land of Israel. Our center becomes the Beis HaMikdash. Jews become reconnected with each other, and God fills the world. More so than a guardian for the morning. People that are on watch and they're waiting for the morning to come. They know the morning is going to come. And they have a certain confidence. I want to be filled with that kind of confidence. Verse 7 and 8. Yachil Yisrael Adonai kim Adonai chesed. Hope to the Lord, for kindness is with the Lord, and much redemption is with him. V'hu yifte es Yisrael. I know it for sure that he is going to redeem us, lift us out of our negativity, lift us out of our transgressions, lift us out of our worst places, mikol avonosav, from all of the things that we've done wrong, and that he is going to bring us back to him. This is a psalm of incredible hope, incredible realization that you know why we're in the place that we're in. We're in the place that we're in because things aren't perfect. And that God is reaching out to us as much as we are reaching out to him. I just want to read you something. I've got 3 minutes on the clock. I just want to read you something that somebody sent, which I found it encapsulated much of what I have said in the past and much of what I'm feeling. A lady wrote this. It appeared on one of the chats, and I just wanted to share it. It'll take me, hopefully, 2.5 minutes. Every night, I check on my children multiple times as they sleep. A flood of gratitude for these precious neshamas floods me. Soon after, tears fall down my face as I think of my brothers and sisters across my precious and holy country who cannot do what I am doing. They walk past empty beds and rooms frozen in time, looking exactly as they did before their precious child was kidnapped by animalistic barbarians. Families destroyed, homes burned. Among the living, mothers and daughters weep over their Tehillim. Fathers and sons are on the battlefields. Sukkah decorations are still hanging for some. The hazy memories of barely more than 2 weeks ago linger in our minds. My thoughts trail back to our festive Sudas, my children playing happily with their toys in the sukkah, and my husband in front of his sefer. Who could have known that days later we would be here, mourning the lost and missing, and dazed by the surprise of an enemy attack no one saw coming? The horrors are unspeakable. The pain is indescribable. I can't daven enough, do enough, give enough. The weight never lifts. The needs of my people consume my thoughts day and night. Every name or face that's posted, I daven for them, and I learn that they were found. But Baruch Dayan Emes, my heart shatters. I weep as if I had lost my own family members, even though I don't know them. I just know they are my Jewish brother or sister. That is our eternal connection. Another rocket, another siren, another fast dash to safety with my family, another news report, another name, another light snuffed out, another soul taken from this world. The pain has passed beyond words. My dear nation, we are feeling the excruciating pangs of this terrible judgment. As a chosen people, we have erred greatly. We have been haughty. We judged each other. We spoke Lashon Hara. We criticized each other. We have argued. We embarrassed and ashamed each other. We have been at odds. We cut each other down over religion and politics. We were selfish. We have sinned 1,000 sins against our fellow Jew. And when Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur came, the din came down. The decree was given. The antidote to judgment is tshuva, turning our hearts wholly and with renewed allegiance to our Creator stops the countdown. When we cry out for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's divine mercy, He responds. He turns towards us and not away from us. And that is what our nation is doing. The shofar is blown. The judgment from Shamayim brought a great disaster and a trauma that is waking us up. We are becoming the Klal Yisrael we are supposed to be. We're treating our fellow Jews' needs as superior to our own. We're extending kindness in place of judgment, encouragement in place of criticism, chesed in place of selfishness, and generosity in place of haughtiness. We're finally acting like a family. We had forgotten our way, forgotten who we are, saw ourselves as grasshoppers against a land of giants, and let the world squash our identity, confidence, and strength until it was but a small flickering wick. The embers of our hearts have been kindled. We're awake. We must not allow ourselves to become complacent or again fall prey to the stupor we are coming out of. We must not slide back into well-worn habits and forget the price that taking that road has cost us. We have to carry the weight of grief and loss forward with us as a reminder lest we forget again. We daven, we cry, we do tshuva, we say Tehillim. We daven that this war ends soon, but we must protect the future of Klal Yisrael and be intentional about the midos, the characteristics that we carry forward with us and instill in our children. We can never forget. We must continue to climb and continue to grow. This achdus, this chesed, this love, it's the new baseline. We must only, be'ezras Hashem, go higher from here. In that merit may we speedily merit the salvation of Hashem and the coming of Mashiach. V'hu yifte es Yisrael. We know that God will redeem us if we drop kol avonosav, we drop our iniquities. If we as a nation, this is not a cry and a call to individuals per se, this is a cry and a call to nations. That if we as a nation adopt this new attitude, this realization that we are all part of the same nation, and it doesn't matter how religious or not religious. It doesn't matter how much to the right we are or how much to the left we are, of whether we belong to this crazy organization or to that crazy organization, whether we're a self-hating Jew or not a self-hating Jew. At the end of the day, we are all tied to each other because we're all part of the Jewish nation. And if we get that message, then we have heard the cries, we have heard our own sounds and our own tefillos, and we will be able to lift ourselves up, because that's what God is waiting for. He's waiting to see that in us so that he can pull us closer to him. And I will tell you, crazily, with confidence, that that's what we're witnessing here in Eretz Yisrael. That's what we're seeing. You might not get this in all the news reports. You might not understand this, but this is what we're seeing happening here. And if it lasts, then this is truly the footsteps of Geula, the footsteps of redemption. Okay. We'll stop there.